We question our daily position, seeking answers and definitions. Get the queries off your chest with Ahkam SOS.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Ahkam SOS, the show that discusses Islamic duties and practices. Before we begin, we would like to send our condolences to the Imam of our time, may Allah hasten his reappearance, and to the Muslim Ummah on the death anniversary of one of our holy figures, the wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen, al-Banin. Now, al-Banin was famous for having 4 sons who all tragically were martyred in the Battle of Karbala. And, during this COVID period, unfortunately, most of our centers are closed, but still, all of us can do what we can, inshallah, to commemorate her anniversary. Shaykhna, a few words, please, on al-Banin.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين عظم الله أجوركم وأجورنا جميعا. On this sad occasion of the demise and the wafat of al-Banin salamullahi alayha, of course we are speechless when it comes to talking about this great lady whom sacrificed 4 of her sons. 4 sons, 3 of them like stars, and 1 of them is like the moon. Al-Abbas alayhi salam. This great sacrifice of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein in Karbala. And of course, the wife of the commander of the faithful, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullahi alayhi. I mean, no one is speechless to talk about the greatness of this lady salamullahi alayha. But anyhow, it was the choice of the Imam who chose this great and noble lady to be his wife when he told an individual to go and look for this
I think it was his brother,
lady,
Aqil. Ja'far, Aqil, yeah.
Aqil, to propose. And the aim was لينصر ولدي الحسين في كربلاء. So I want a woman who eventually give birth to a child who will support and assist my son Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala. That was the aim, the utmost aim of this great lady to be in this holy household. And when she was brought to the house of Amir al-Mu'min alayhi salam, she said, I want to be a servant to Hassan and Hussein and Zainab salamullah alayhim. And briefly, some of the ulama recommended some acts if somebody wants to basically fulfill his needs and hawa'ij, that if you can, for example, recite 100 salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad 100 times to fulfill your need and give it as a gift to al-Banin salamullah alayha. Some others would mention that, of the ulama, that recite the majlis of al-Banin salamullah alayha, also the hawa'ij will be fulfilled and given. Some others mentioned that she is the gate of the needs of the hawa'ij, Babul hawa'ij.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So anything you need, go to the gate of the hawa'ij, al-Banin salamullahi alayha.
So just a quick reminder to all our viewers that this is a live show, and if you have a question you'd like to ask, please send in your questions via the WhatsApp, the email address which is ahkamsos@imamhussein.tv, or alternatively give us a call here in the studio 0203 515 0199, and inshallah we'll be able to discuss and answer your questions. Shaykhna, my first question is in regards to arguably a controversial topic, but having a child being born outside the womb of the mother or the womb of the wife, Islamically speaking, is this acceptable?
Well, it is as the same ruling of the child conceived inside the womb. So if it's from the same husband and wife, the same components, the same entities, and placed outside the womb somewhere else, then it remains their child, a legitimate, a halal child. There's no issue with it, as long as the origins are from the same components of the husband and the wife, the married couples, not from outside source, from the same family. That should be fine.
Shaykhna, a question coming in from one of our viewers hopefully be up on the screen. Here we are. What is the ruling regarding the operation that doctors perform for the man or woman to prevent pregnancy, given that it is possible after a while to undo that in order to attain pregnancy? So we have in the medicine field what we call a temporary contraceptive. For males, it's called vasectomy. For females, I'm not really sure the actual name of the procedure, but basically this disables the powers of giving birth temporarily, not permanent. Islamically speaking, is this acceptable?
Well, if it doesn't cause the permanent infertility, then it is allowed. As you said, the short term is fine, but if it causes permanent, that they can't get pregnant, for example, forever, then that's forbidden. They have to allow it, basically.
Okay. Sheikhna, many TV channels, they offer a monthly subscription. You have to pay for them, which is understandable, okay, because there's costs and there's budgets and so forth. Some of these channels will have content throughout the day, but at night maybe they'll have content which is not suitable for young children, maybe not suitable for even as an Islamic preference is not suitable, whether it's violence or whether there's indecent images or so forth. According to His Eminence Sayyid Sistani, are we allowed to subscribe to these channels?
Well, His Eminence mentions that it is not allowed unless the one is sure and confident that himself and his family or those who live with him in the same house, they won't be watching such indecent programs. So if you're sure about it, fine, you can subscribe to such channels and shows and so forth. Otherwise, if you know that there's somebody in the family member who would watch, it would sneak through and come after 12 a.m. at night and tries to watch those channels, then it's not allowed.
I see. Like they say, prevention is the best of cures.
Exactly.
Sheikhna, if a individual who's deceased hasn't specifically mentioned in his will where he wants his 1/3 of his wealth to be spent, is it okay for the children, or maybe like the brother or so forth, one in charge, to spend that money in terms of for a charitable cause? Maybe it's to help some widows, some orphans, maybe to support a certain group, for example, like Estashabi and stuff, like fighting ISIS and so forth. Is this considered a continuous charitable cause? His Eminence the Grand Ayatollah Sheikh Bashir Najafi, he discusses this topic. What does he say?
His Eminence mentions that it is not permissible because as soon as this individual dies and passes away, all his wealth will be now in the possession and the ownership of the heirs, of the inheritors, unless he has made a will that, as you mentioned, the 1/3. But if he hasn't, then nobody is allowed to make use of this money or wealth unless by going back to the heirs, to the inheritors, and asking their permission that I want to spend this 1/3, which is not in the will of this deceased individual, for the good causes, for the charity. Without their consent, the one cannot spend these monies.
Sheikhna, according to His Eminence, the late Sayyid Muhammad Shirazi, rahmatullah alayhi, what does he say in regards to, I want to initiate salam to a non-believer, or if a non-believer was to say salam to me, the response I should give?
Yes, he would mention that it is permissible for the one to reply the salam to the non-believers, but you would say wa alaykum, for example, because salamun alaykum wa alaykum salam is merely for the believers, for the Muslimin, for the mu'mineen. So for the others who are not from your same faith or belief, then you can just say wa alaykum or other means of greetings. That should be fine.
To the viewers, if you do have a question, please, send it via the WhatsApp, email address, or you could call us in. And if you are calling, please bear with us. There may be some issues on our side, but also make sure you have, your correct conditions, inshallah, for you to call in. Inshallah, we're going to go to a break, Shaykhna, and join us after the break as we continue our discussion here on Ahkam SOS. See you after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Ahkam SOS, the show that discusses Islamic duties and practices. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykhna.
Assalamu alaikum.
Before we begin, I do believe we have a phone call. Inshallah, we'll be able to speak to our dear viewer. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, Sayyidina.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. Your question, please, for the Shaykh.
What is the ruling for wudu if I have a plaster
Okay.
or an injury?
Where is the plaster? Is it on your hand, on your arm, face?
Yeah, it's on my arm.
On the arm. Plaster on the arm.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, brother. Please take care of yourself. And inshallah, Shaykhna, plaster on the arm. How is one to perform wudu?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yes, basically we have a type of wudu called wudu al-Jabiri, or the Jabira wudu, which means you do the wudu where there's a splint. Basically, there's an injury that you cannot leave it open and exposed to other issues, so to the najasa. So you have to cover it somehow with a bandage or plaster. In this case, we'll have the wudu al-Jabiri, which means you do the wudu and you just wipe on it gently, and that would be a valid wudu, inshallah, until it's healed, inshallah.
Ahsant. Quick reminder to our viewers that we do take in your questions. If you have a question, send it in via the WhatsApp email address or call us in. We just had a phone call now, and Sheikh, now we've had a question sent in from one of our viewers also. Inshallah, it'll be up on the screen shortly. It is common knowledge that fish is caught using nets in Western countries. Is this fish permissible to eat? So not the conventional way of a fishing rod or maybe a spear or something, a sharp, but using big nets for, I guess it's for commercial fishing where they catch hundreds and thousands of fish. Islamically speaking, are these allowed? Are these halal for us to eat?
Well, if it's a well-known method of catching the fish, hunting the fish, as you've said, through the net, and they would basically put the fish inside the boat and so forth, and the fish that is, let's say, hunted is with the scales, for example, or prawns, the exception, then it's halal to eat, even if it was hunted by non-Muslims, as I've said before. Even one of the ulama in London, he was saying that a couple of years that we watched how the UK fishermen catch the fish. So through the TV programs, documentaries and so forth. So we can now be confident in consuming the fish which is now in the market. Inshallah.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Shaykhna, here in the West, we have a lot of people who are not from Ahl Kitab or not from a Muslim background. So when we take over their properties, when we purchase their houses and so forth, and we move in, can we deem the property to be tahir, or do we have to come with intention and being cautious that the things here, the items are najis?
Of course, everything is tahir unless you're certain that it is najis and impure. Everything is tahir, but if you're known that this spot or this place is najis, then of course you have to purify it or avoid it in somehow.
Check out a question in from one of our viewers. What is the ruling for the leather from an animal that its meat is not eaten, such as a fox or a lion, imported from non-Muslim countries? I'm guessing the ruling is whether it's tahir or najis, or maybe if it's halal or haram to wear, I'm not sure. But Shaykhna, answer as you please.
Yes, basically, if this animal was slaughtered in the haram way, as we mentioned, then, and it's a gushing blood animal type, then of course the skin is najis.
Okay.
If you buy a jacket in this situation, you can't pray with it. If there was rain and that jacket cross-contaminated with your body, for example, with your shirt, with your body, wetness, moisture transferred from the jacket to your body, then you have to wash your body, and so forth. So you have to be careful. You better avoid it and buy from the Muslim countries. There are leather jackets made in Iran, Iraq, Turkey, you can buy them and they're halal, inshallah. There's no issue with it.
Okay.
Rather than buying from other non-Muslim countries.
Excellent. Sheikhna, is it permissible to do financial betting on competitions, especially sport? For example, there's sports such as football, rugby, tennis, and so forth, which are, according to Sharia, halal. So am I allowed to put financial bets on these tournaments and these sports?
No, it is not permissible because placing bets is haram and forbidden. In overall, gambling, betting is not allowed. There's a hadith that I found interesting. A narrator called Ishaq bin Ammar, he asks Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and he says to the Imam that الصبيان يلعبون بالجوز والبيض ويقامرون. Excuse me. The boys, young boys, they play with walnuts, the whole walnuts, the rounded one, and with eggs as well. They play with it, but they gamble. They bet when they play with eggs and walnuts. They gamble. In the old days, they didn't have Xbox and games and so forth. So they used to play with eggs and walnuts and fruits and vegetables as a means of tools of games and play and toys. So those kids, they actually use the eggs and the walnut, the whole walnut, as a means of gambling and betting.
Oh, okay.
So the Imam alayhi salam replied. He said to him, لا تأكل منه فإنه حرام. Do not eat these food stuff, they are haram. Because now they've been used as a gambling means and gambling tools and so forth. Of course, we have to see what the ulama say in terms of the fatwa. Is the fatwa that, if I really, let's say, there was, a couple of eggs with some kids playing with it and betting with it, are we allowed to eat them or not? This basically goes back to the ulama to issue the fatwa. Because even these ahadith, they discuss about it. They debate about the authenticity, for example, the chain of narrators, for example. Does this haram means makruh or haram, and so forth. So we have to go back to the ulama to get the fatwa. But as an idea, as just a notion that we can see how Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam dealt with such issues, very sensitive issues about gambling or alcohol, that the Imam would stand up when he sees somebody brings alcohol on the table, dinner table. He would leave the majlis, would leave the place. So to basically inform people that to stay away from these muharramat, don't fall into such forbidden acts.
Interesting, very interesting. Sheikh, now a question in from one of our viewers. Is it, if the principal discharge his agent, is it permissible for the agent to carry out the duties he had been assigned to do after he receives his notice?
Well, you just mentioned discharge his duties, so it's not permissible. That's it, he's finished. He's out of the office, in other words. But if the duties they carried out before the discharge, then he can actually do them. But if he's out, that's it. He can't carry out any more duties.
I see. Sheikhna, mashallah, very popular today. We have another question from one of our viewers, inshallah. In order for the grant or gift to become effective, what should the one needs to do or say?
Basically, you give the grant or the gift to the other side, to the individual, that this is yours, and not necessarily to utter or basically prescribe or speak it out. So just by giving a gift, let's say there's a mu'min on the Eid day, and in the mosque he would give out pound coins, for example, to the children, to others, as a gift, without even saying anything. He would smile and give out the one pound coin. That's it, it's yours, it's a gift. So basically, yeah, it's just giving and taking that which confirms the grant or the gift.
What about when a lender forgoes his debt to a borrower as a gift? Is it permissible for the lender to actually demand the debt back?
No, it's not permissible. So when it's been given as a he granted this loan. No more. He wants this any more than that's it. It's not permissible to go back here.
Shaykhna, a question from one of our viewers, inshallah. In the West, some countries provide financial help to those who are of limited income, which may include food stuff. Is it permissible for Muslims to receive such help if they are entitled to it? So I guess this is in regards to general welfare of the public, and here in the UK we have food banks. Sometimes there's like, you know, and I know in America you used to have like food stamps and food vouchers and so forth. As Muslims, are we allowed, if we are entitled to this, are we allowed to receive this help?
Well, it is permissible for those who are eligible for it. They are in need of it. They are poor individuals, let's say homeless, for example, jobless, they're unemployed, for example. Yes, they can. Unless if there are haram issues involved, and that's a different issue. I mean, sometimes they invite people, for example, in some European countries to go to the church, for example, to do some practices.
Yes.
So if it contains and includes haram substances, items, or acts, or services, then of course that one should avoid. Otherwise it's halal if you're eligible for it, of course.
Shaykhna, you mentioned alcohol before, and the Imam standing and walking away from someone bringing alcohol and so forth. What if I'm working in a shop, you know, and let's say there's a lack of staff or so forth, and you know my principal duties are not to, you know, deal in alcohol or so forth. However, there's a lack of staff, you know, and there's a big queue or something. I should go to the cashier and help, you know, with you know, reduce the queue. And someone comes and you know, I have to swipe alcohol and you know, do a transaction with and so forth. Islamically speaking, am I allowed to do this? Now, His Eminence, the Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Sa'id Hakim, Hafadullah, he discusses this. What does he say?
His Eminence mentions that it is prohibited and haram to sell wine or alcohol, even indirectly or even represent the company on behalf of the company. I mean, that's why I always advise our youth that do not work in the cashier points in the supermarkets, because you'll end up selling alcohol, you know, scanning alcohol bottles. So try to avoid such positions or roles at work. Yes, stick with your warehouse jobs, for example, the backyard work, for example, or packing and shelving and so forth, to avoid the act of haram, because you don't want to get involved in such act. As I mentioned before, that there are individuals whom are cursed by the Prophet ﷺ, the one who carries the alcohol, the ones who sells it, the ones who buys it, the ones who brews it, the ones who drinks, and so forth. So we have to avoid such jobs in which will bring to us in dunya anxiety, and in the akhirah على كل حال عذاب and نعوذ بالله. So we try to avoid it, inshallah.
Shaykhna, sadaqah is, you know, one part of our, you know, daily routines for some of us and so forth. If I set some money aside as sadaqah, and it's a mustahab, it's not a wajib sadaqah, it's mustahab sadaqah, put some money aside, does that now become obligatory for me to give that sadaqah because I've put it aside?
It seems to be some of the maraja would say that it's not, it doesn't make it, you know, wajib for you to pay it as a sadaqah, as long as it is in your possession. Now you still have it. Let's say you have it in your pocket. So you made the intention to give it sadaqah, inshallah, that you keep it aside. But it's yours at the moment. But of course, it's better to avoid touching such monies kept aside for sadaqah, for charity, and so forth. It's better. But still, it is in your possession. No, it's not wajib to pay it. But it's a lot better than ignoring this issue, because this sadaqah basically to protect your well-being, your life, your assets, your goods, and so forth.
Ahsan. Thank you very much, Shaykhna. And thank you to all the viewers for joining us on this episode of Ahkam SOS. We do want to apologize for the technical difficulties that we did have if you were trying to get through to us. But inshallah, we'll be back on Monday, I believe, inshallah, with a new episode of Ahkam SOS. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, now there's no question that is silly or taboo or something that we won't be able to understand, or we'll feel embarrassed to go and ask. It is our duty to give you the correct Islamic information in regards to these topics. We don't need to know your name or anything like that. Just send in your question via the WhatsApp, email address, or give us a call, and me and the Sheikh will do our best to find out your answers. If there is a certain particular marja that you follow, we do have good relationships with all the offices and their representatives, and we can go and speak to them directly to get the answer from the marja that you have specified, inshallah. So thank you very much for joining us. Inshallah, we'll see you again here on Ahkam SOS. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
We question our daily position, seeking answers and definitions. Get the queries off your chest with Ahkam SOS.